Okay, um, you guys should be on chapter 7. Again, you just kind of have one chapter, but we're moving ahead on the project, and so I'm going to just briefly go into what's going to be due next this week, and I'll set the due date. I haven't done that. I'll probably set it for Sunday night. I think 6 people have already submitted, but this week you have your payroll and your operating expenses due, correct? Okay. Let me say something too about feedback, okay? Make sure you're going in and checking out your feedback, because I will leave feedback, and if you've made a grievous error or something that requires fixing, I'll generally put a comment in there. I'll try to always put a comment in there that would say something to the effect of, you need to fix this and resubmit, okay, to that same Dropbox. Does that make sense? Okay. Every now and then, not real often, but every now and then I might put more of a less important comment, let's call it that, I guess, where I might just say, God, I think your rent expense is a little low, okay? That doesn't mean that you necessarily have to fix that and resubmit it, okay? That's just more of an editorial comment, I would say, that, based on my experience or based on, what I've seen in the real world and whatnot, that may be a little bit off. I'm more concerned about you getting the numbers right, but I'll make some comments like that just so I can, if I don't think you're totally realistic, it'll hopefully help you realize I think what's really going on. So anyhow, so watch for those comments. If I give you feedback to resubmit, oftentimes those are really small, just little things that got messed up, and I just want you to fix it so we get it right. Especially getting it right early is important, because then, when it comes time to balance at the end, it's extremely important to have it right at the beginning. So, okay, so pay attention to those and get them back. The sooner, I kind of, too, so I'll kind of base grading a little bit on the project based on how soon you get back. I get that we're going to make some mistakes. That's no big deal, but if I give you a comment and you don't fix it for 2 weeks, that's not really good. I'm probably going to discount you reasonably there. If you fix it and get right back, there still might be a little bit of discount, but, the discount then would be pretty minor. Okay? So read your feedback, get back to me as quickly as possible. The next stage or the next thing that we have in Project 1 is going to be your sales forecast. Okay? And there is a limitation to this program, and one of the limitations is here in the sales forecast. I should say there are some limitations throughout this. And the reason I say that is, it only gives us 6 possible product lines. For most of us, that's just fine. In fact, I think everybody in here will get by with that pretty easily. But I know, not here today, but a couple of people have said they want like a retail store, okay? Yours was a retail store too, wasn't it, Goldberg? Yeah. So you're kind of limited here, because let's face it, if you had a retail store, clothing store, you would have 60 or 70 or 100 different items that are going to have different prices, that are maybe even going to have different cost of goods sold and whatnot, okay? So what you got to kind of do is average those things out. In your case, you might have shirts. You might have shoes, instead of running shoes, basketball shoes, football, you might just have to say shoes. My average price is going to be $118. My average cost of goods sold is going to be $72. Okay? And so you in those cases, you just got to kind of average that out maybe so that you can fit it into the 6. I've messed around with it, and I can expand those lines. It gets to be a little bit complicated, and it kind of screws up the rest of the form. So if we can make it fit in those 6 product lines, that's great. So how you do this one is you just enter, your product line might be shoes, right? The units are pairs of shoes, right? Whatever you want to call it. Again, sales price per unit, and in your case, it might be an average, $120. That's probably not too far off for an average pair of shoes in today's day and age. Cost of goods sold, again, most retail clothing and whatnot, you got about a 100% markup or a 50%. cost of goods sold, somewhere in that. Might be a little bit higher cost of goods sold than that, so I might say 70. Boom. I got a margin per unit then of $50, okay? Let's give you another example though, because a lot of you might do, you might have service businesses. We got a dojo here, right? So your product line there might be lessons, right? Units might be by the hour, let's just say. It might be something else. It might be an individual. It might be a group lesson. You know, you might have some different breakdowns like that. That's kind of up to you to tell me, right? But if I give an hour-long lesson, okay, and I'm going to charge $50, whatever it is, what's my cost of goods sold there? 0, yeah. So you might have 0. You might, if you've got, you know, an employee that's going to teach a lesson, okay, you might be paying the employee $30, okay, and you might be 50 now. But we're not doing it that way because you've already listed your employee on the payroll expense. So your employee's getting paid by the hour, regardless of whether they have, you know, because they might be cleaning the place or whatever, right? But there would be some cases, and I don't think I asked anybody to set theirs up like that, but shops, you know, like a mechanic shop or something might have something like that where you've got labor that you're paying at X dollars per hour, and you're charging out a different, you know, the shop rate could be different, and so you got a little profit margin there, or margin per unit. Okay. Now we do some estimates, okay? And this is where some seasonality can sure come in too, right? You know, in January, I might not be selling a bunch of shoes. January is usually a pretty slow month anyhow, but all I got to do here, you can see most of these are white, you know, white cells. So I just got to estimate how many shoes I'm going to sell in a month. I think I'm going to sell 100 shoes, right? Boom, it calculates everything then for me. And you go through the months. You know, if you've got that type of business where you think your sales are going to be pretty even, that's great. You know, a lot of businesses, of course, have at least some seasonality in it. Okay. Same thing, lessons then. You know, hours sold, or again, this could be lessons. Maybe isn't the right one. Maybe it's individual or versus group or versus something. But you know, so I'm going to do each month. I'm going to have. Well, you know, if you're full time and you're filled up, and you know you got 40 hours a week, and you know, maybe I can give 40 hours a week of lessons. That's great. So you know, times 4 gives me a pretty rough idea. 160. You got an extra day or two in there because there's a little more than 4 weeks in most months, right? But even so, 160 might, and it's pretty tough to be all filled up. Maybe I say I'm just going to be 150 hours a month. Okay. Even that would be pretty aggressive for that type of a business, I would think, because most of those are going to be in the evenings. You know, you're going to have 3-4 hours maybe in the evening that you're doing that. You may have some other things that you got some income coming in, but whatever it is, okay? So that gives you a, you know, again, for 1 month, you extend that out, you fill it out. The bottom line is what's kind of important here, and something I went around, I know on Tuesday, and for several of you I said, hey, okay, what's your operating expenses and what's your payroll, right? Operating expenses were, you know, $70,000. Payroll was $20,000. Boom, that's $90,000 that I have in costs right now that I got to make sure I cover, okay? And this bottom right-hand corner number, you know, that total margin, I probably better get there, okay? And maybe even a little bit more, okay? Because I also got to pay myself a little bit. That said, you know, it's not unusual for the first year of a business to be a little bit negative, okay? And the owner doesn't get paid. So we can, you know, we can have those discussions, and that's fine. But you ought to take a look at that. Where it gets a little bit crazy is sometimes, you know, I'll see somebody's expenses are 150 grand, and they submit this, and their net margin down here is 65,000. Oops, you know, that's not going to work, right? Okay, and so a lot of that is, you're kind of wearing the right shirt for this classroom, Kayla. It is. It's generally kind of. It's not too bad this morning, but a lot of mornings in this classroom, it's kind of chilly. So yeah. Okay, so just pay attention to that, you know, and try to make this, you know, at least as good as what your total operating expenses and your total payroll are.
I have a question on that.
Yeah.
If that is the case, if our cost is way more than our sales,
Yep.
is it better to go back and adjust the operating expense or just increase sales on this page here?
Okay, the question was for people that might be listening to this on the recording was, let's say there is some disparity between the costs, say your costs are too high or your sales are too low. Which one's better to adjust? My answer is going to be a little nebulous, and I'm going to tell you it kind of depends. If you think your costs are pretty accurate, then we better go back and take a look at those sales forecasts. Okay, and that's kind of why I have you do those costs first, so that you hopefully get a pretty good idea of where they're at. If you got a question though about an individual expense, you know, give me a holler and we'll come and take a look at that, because there could be some reasons to change that. You know, you might have your rent at $2,000 a month, and I might say, geez, you know, I'll bet you if you called the mall today, you could probably rent a pretty good spot for $400 a month, right? They're just trying to get some tenants in there, you know, and so, you know, so there could be some reasons to make some changes in the expense side, but for the most part, you're probably going to need to adjust the, you know, the sales side would be my guess in most cases. Okay, and that could be either the sales number in terms of how much you think you might sell, but it also could be in the margin. Again, some people might not, you know, they might not build in enough margin. Okay, and so you can manipulate that a little bit, or we manipulate the cost of goods sold. We bring that down a little bit so that the margin goes up a little. Okay. Any questions about that? Any questions about the sales? This will probably do next week, sales and additional inputs. And Tuesday I'll talk about the additional inputs that will be the other part. That's fairly simple, the additional inputs, but there's some things that we do there that affect some other things, and so it gets to be a little bit gnarly, but not too bad. So I will sign off in that case. Did everybody get their quiz done?